Okay, we are live. I hope that there are people still paying attention. We apologize for the delay. There was a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we have here today, if you guys want to just introduce yourself and just quickly say what kind of research that you do, just so that people have an idea.
Sure. Shall I lead out since I'm, well, a long way away, 10,000 K apparently. So my name is Lesley Ferkins and I'm from Auckland, New Zealand, or in American US language, Auckland. Might help you understand that word a little better. And I am an associate professor at the University, Auckland University of Technology, so AUT. Did you see that? John is having some challenges. Would you like us to pause?
John, do you?
John is not the challenge. Technical.
Can you hear us?
This is John. I think I have solved the problem.
Okay, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. This is very professional.
Okay. Shall I keep going?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just introducing myself, John. Auckland University of Technology. My research area is in sport leadership and governance, particularly in the governance field to date, but also an increasing interest in leadership and governance. I work a lot in the organised sports system, so with national sport organisations and government agencies, and I solely concentrate on qualitative or interpretive styles of research, and my most favoured form is action research. That is me.
Go for it, John.
So we're just doing introductions, I take it?
Yes.
Well, I'm Jon Welty Peachey, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and my third year here at the University of Illinois. Was at Texas A&M University before that, as was Adam. And my research area, if that's what we're introducing about, is sport for development and peace. And so I do a lot of work with regards to theory development of how we can effectively design, implement, monitor, evaluate types of programs that are working at positive social change, whether it's at the individual, community level, whatever that might be. Looking at how we can effectively design and potentially see positive outcomes from those types of programs. And my other research area is leadership. So maybe a little bit like Lesley. So I've done a lot of work in leadership, not so much at the governance level, but more looking at leadership of sport organizations and effective leadership styles. How they work with guiding change in relation to potential outcomes as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So my name's Adam Cohen. I'm also I'm a third-year professor at Texas Tech University. We're in the middle of nowhere, Texas, somewhere in the Panhandle. My research also, I do a lot with sport for development, sport for social change. Some of John. So I won't repeat some of the stuff he said. I've also done a lot of work looking at kind of non-traditional sports and motivations for participation and impact of participation. And I've recently started diving into some more international stuff, looking at volunteer motivation, volunteer tourism, and kind of cultural immersion and use of sport for development programs in that capacity. So that's my Cliff Notes.
Okay, so first question, start us off. Why should students consider developing partnerships with one or two organizations rather than one-off projects with a wide variety of organizations? Who wants to start us off?
Should we reverse the order?
I'll let someone smarter than me go first.
Well, I can lead us off, and then hopefully everybody else can piggyback on what I say and make it better. I can think of, I think, one or two related points, and from my work, and that is when you can develop a relationship with, say, one organization, and you can cultivate that over time. What you're doing is you're building a sustainability for a research project or research projects over the course of really over many years, as opposed to when you do one-off projects and you focus with a lot of organizations, you might just come in and do something and then leave. But what I found is when you really stay with and learn to know and develop a relationship with a particular organization, that when one project is done, that can naturally segue into another project, and then into another project, and then into another project. So once you develop that relationship and that trust with one organization, that can benefit you over the long term. And that can be good for your research program. For me, it's also led to consulting. So you can develop types of more consultative relationships as well. So there's a lot of positive win-win benefits to doing that, both for the organization and for yourself as well. So I'll leave it at that and pass the buck to somebody else.
Sure. I'll jump in, and I'll take it from a different perspective, from just the kind of the intrinsic side of it, where especially a lot of the research I do when I'm dealing with nonprofits or social justice initiatives and things of that nature, that I like immersing myself in their culture and learning about them and doing more than just simple, here's a survey, give me the data, let me turn it into a p-value, and then I'll never talk to you again. So some of the work myself and Jon we've done is we've been collaborating with the Homeless Soccer Initiative for 4 or 5 years or so. And some of our real immersion in this partnership, for one, has led to more interesting research, like Jon said, is something that started as a simple kind of pre-post evaluation turned into longitudinal narrative inquiries and things of that nature. But besides the research, I've got to see this organization grow, and really, really proud of the work that they've done from the 4 or 5 years where they've gone small and they've gotten bigger and bigger, and their impact has gotten bigger and bigger. I've been able to build relationships with key stakeholders, whether it's participants they've helped, or people that work for the organization, or volunteers and things of that nature. So just this idea of immersing myself in an organization, I've enjoyed the experience more. And I guess another thing is I come from a practitioner background, so I guess I respect a lot of the work that they do, and I just don't want to disassociate myself from seeing the outcomes that they have. So a little rambly, but you get what I'm saying there.
Yeah, we have, I think, pretty similar views. Natalie, as the adjudicator, I was just going to ask you if the rules of engagement allowed us to ask our fellow panelists questions as well as you. Is that an okay thing, or do you want to keep to the script?
Oh, no. I study creativity, so let's get creative with this.
All right. I won't launch for the question just yet, but I did have one probably in the middle of what Jon was saying. I'll grab him next time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a very similar approach to the reasons why a couple of organisations are a good focus rather than many. It's certainly the way that I've built my program of research, and I feel like it's really paid dividends, primarily in terms of being able to return value for them. And so, especially with an action research model, which is designed to spend some decent time in the field with, and helping to understand the issues, really analyse and figure out the context. So yeah, Adam's word was understanding the culture. I would absolutely reinforce that, but also add that the context is huge that you're dealing with, and the better that you can understand that, the more you can help to create change, develop learning, but also glean need in terms of future projects. So all of those things contribute to spending time with one or two organisations in a sustained way. And I think one of the things we struggle with in terms of our output requirements is doing field work that's any longer than 6 months. So if you can do a project that's 6 months but then carry on and do another project, then you might get 2 or 3 or 5 years worth of in-depth understanding and work with the organisation. So Yeah, there's and you know, when you hang out with people, you build relationships. And that's the essence to me of doing good research.
Thanks. Do you want to ask your question now, or do you want to?
So I was interested in when you were talking about what you're talking about. I was thinking of what are the examples, what are the organisations that you've worked with that have allowed you to do that and been successful?
Is that a question for me, Lesley, or for Adam, or for?
Probably both. Let's start with you.
Well, Adam mentioned one organization, which was Street Soccer USA, that we both worked with. And that's one that I think we started our relationship with them in 2009, I believe. Does that sound right, Adam?
2010 for me, 9 for you.
I think 2009 for me when we first started that. Yeah. Which, you know, began with a simple little impact study of a tournament, and then continued to grow as trust was built and ideas were shared into you know, a long-term research program. So that's been one. Another specific example would be a intercollegiate athletic department that I can't name, but a Division I program here in the United States that I've been working with, that I began working with in 2006, I think, 2007, coming in and doing a case study with that organization on leadership, actually, and change. And since that time, they've brought me back a number of times as a consultant on leadership issues and change issues and how to manage that. But it goes back to, I think, Lesley, what you were saying too, and I think what we're all saying is you have to build that foundation of trust and those relationships, and that's really what builds that partnership. That's really what builds that sustainable connection over time. That you deliver what you promise, that you know, trusting, that you're discreet, that you know, you handle the ethical issues well, and when they see that you do that, and those relationships are built, then that just sets up a long-term, you know, partnership for success for both organizations, or for yourself and for the organization. You probably found very similar things too.
You bet. You bet. And you know, I guess it starts with you know, one of the big challenges of doing research with organisations is getting access, and you know, access is built on trust and delivering value, and that's hard. You know, that's hard to do when you just go in and out briefly. So yeah, absolutely.
So piggybacking off of that, how do graduate students start that process? You know, I know sometimes it's an old friend, or it's because your advisor, you know, worked with somebody. But you know, how else do you? Let's say you're interested in something that might be slightly different than your advisor, or you just don't have, you feel like the leg in type of thing. How do you build those? How do you find those relationships? How do you build them as a graduate student?
Sure. I'll go first on this one. A lot of it simply is making the effort. Whether it's, and it's way too simplistic, but the idea of you know, those of you that are watching, the life of a grad student is networking as much as possible, using your connections, whether it's in the practitioner world, whether it's in academia, whether it's your parents' friends, or whatever it is just, you know, don't be afraid to use whatever connections you can. Go to as many conferences as you can, or go to as many workshops or things of that nature. On the other side is simply don't be afraid to ask. One of the advantages you have as grad students is you have this kind of young passion and fire that you haven't been broken by academia yet. You don't have 72 projects going on. Is you can dive into something and really get into it. So one of my first collaborations was with working with the International Quidditch Association, and I simply emailed them and I said, look, I'm really fascinated by your sport. I'm a big Harry Potter nerd. I want to learn more about it. I want to dive into this research. I send them an email, and you know, they're not going to tell me go screw. We don't want to tell you about ourselves. You know, if they see that you care, they're going to respond in turn for the most part, because people love talking about themselves. People love talking about what they do. People love talking to people that are interested in them. So that would be just kind of like the first step I would say is just don't. Worst case, you send an email and they don't respond or you get no answer. But just throw yourself out there, I guess, is the short answer to that.
Adam,
Yeah,
do you still have the only dissertation on Quidditch?
I am the second most published person next to J.K. Rowling on the sport.
excellent. Excellent. That's great. That's great.
Do you have other things?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, using your personal networks and you know, connections is pretty important. You know, often that is the way you do get access. Not because you know you have credentials, but because people know someone who knows someone, and so on. Yeah, and I guess thinking about my own PhD experience and working with the 3 case organisations that I did, one of them was my own sport, which was tennis, so I already had connections in there. But the other 2 just came from New Zealand football, and New Zealand squash just came from talking to people who knew people. And it was about willingness. You know, I think these guys might be interested in, you know, working with you. So, you know, finding people that you know, were actually had a willingness and an appetite to take on such a project. Yeah.
And if it's my turn to share just a bit, I'll echo my colleagues' sentiments exactly. They said it very well, and I'll add 2 additional points that I can think of right now. Maybe there's more, but another strategy might be to identify the right entree person in the organization. So we need to develop our networks and follow those leads and everything, but so sometimes identifying, you know, what we might call a cause champion within the organization, somebody that's going to identify with what you're wanting to do, the research that you want to do, what you're proposing. It might not be the CEO, it might not be the executive director, it might not be the marketing director, but somebody else within the organizational hierarchy that's your best entree point. So sometimes that takes a little bit of research and Googling and other things to figure out who's the best person to come in. And then the other thing I would say is once you make that connection in your initial feelers is to be sure you articulate how what you're proposing to do will benefit the organization. That it's just not about you and your research and what you want to do, but that what you're proposing to do is going to have high value and benefit the organization that you're wanting to partner with, and be specific as to how that might be. Because that's really going to be appealing to an organization then to consider working with you, is that they're going to have some value coming from the work that you're going to do. So if you can articulate that up front, that might be another way to get your foot in the door.
You bet. And I think some of the fish hooks can be language. I guess as a grad student, there's less distance from you in the sector, in the industry, than there is from people like us who have been institutionalized for longer. But you know, often I find myself needing to find a different vocabulary when I do industry engagement, and you know, because there's the ways that we describe things, and the ways that some of the industry organisations refer to things can be quite different. So that's I think a really important thing to remember. And the other thing is often the work that we do is important but not urgent. So you know, generating knowledge and learning about future change and improvement, you know, that's kind of the basis of what we do, isn't it? It's not immediate day-to-day stuff, is it, at all? And that's the challenge of the sector and industry organisations, is that, you know, there are day-to-day big challenges that they've got to keep their eye on, and we come in it from a bit of a, you know, much more of a long-term point of view and learning point of view. So just appreciating that, and appreciate, you know, having some persistence, realising that that email that you sent 3 or 4 days ago is not the most urgent priority, but it is, you know, hopefully will be important. There are different KPIs for us, and organisations. So just appreciating all of those things and you know, understanding and navigating that.
Kind of piggybacking on that, something that I found in the last 4 years, being on the tail end of my PhD, is the idea of differences in timing, and balancing the timing that the trajectory that I have, you know, within this 4-year time period, and the trajectory that they may have, and the expectations they may have. You know, how do you balance those two?
So are you referring to that our outcomes can take much longer or more long term, and
Yes.
that they anticipate or think that immediate results can happen?
Yes, that's yeah, and that idea that we have multiple projects potentially going on, and you know, other obligations beyond this one project, and this partnership. You know, how do you balance that? Because obviously, you know, we'll also be moving into some teaching and, you know, and service and that type of thing as well.
Yeah. You look like you're about to speak.
That's a great question, and I guess it's my turn to take a stab at it first. So I'll try. I'm not sure I have the best answer, but other than the cliche of saying be honest with them, I think I found that to be really helpful, is that being honest at the outset as to the length of time that things might take, and help to educate the organization or the individuals that you're working with on the research process. Because what I've found is that oftentimes they don't really know the extent of what research is. So what they do to collect data, say a marketing department's doing a few focus groups, or they're getting some marketing data to make some decisions, they can do pretty quick because they don't have to worry about IRB and other things. But obviously that data is not publishable. And so when we come into it, we bring a whole another lens that we bring in order to get what we need, which is some publishable data, and then hopefully to give them what they need as well, data to make organizational improvements. But you just have to be really frank and honest and sit down and work together at a timetable that's going to work. So involving them in that process, I think, is helpful, and not just coming in and thrusting it upon them and saying, here's what we're going to do, it's going to take this long, et cetera, but kind of working with them, engaging with them, helping to educate them about why it's going to take this length of time, how could they be helpful to facilitate. Maybe there's some ways that you can gain efficiencies in the process, some points where they have some ideas that could help to make things go a little bit smoother. So kind of working at that engagement together is my biggest piece of advice, I guess, and be honest with that.
I'll throw a quick little bit. Whenever I collaborate, I almost kind of joke with the organizations and tell them that they're getting what they pay for. Especially when I was a grad student, is that a lot of the work I did or I've done could cost, you know, if they wanted to pay for it, they could pay $15,000, $25,000 for consulting and data and executive reports and impact assessments and things of that nature. So I'm realistic, and I tell them that academia can tend to move slow. This is a process, whether we're dealing with IRB or we're dealing with just publications in general or presentations and things of that nature, is, like Jon was saying, is just to be upfront. And my process is I always try to like trickle a little information to them. Is, you know, I'll give them preliminary stuff. You know, this isn't finalized data, but here's a little taste of it to let you know that we're on the right track here, and here's a snapshot of what I hope to show you in a bigger picture 4 months from now, 6 months from now, or so. So, like, yeah, pretty much what Jon said is just, you know, set the bar low, and it's easier to jump over it than setting expectations too high and then disappointing.
Yeah, you bet. Under promise, over deliver. Yeah, and keep the conversation going. Keep updates. And, you know, keep perhaps offering some opportunity for value, even in terms of university sport organisation relationships, which might go beyond research. So, you know, there could be an intern you can organise to get them to have. There could be some event volunteers from your class that you could draw on. So, you know, some other opportunities for delivering value along the way as well can help with that big lag between producing outcomes and the work that you have to do. Yeah.
And picking up on that a little bit in terms of the deliverables, I think, and I'm not sure this fits here in another topic, but I'll just bring it up here. Natalie can shush me if it doesn't fit, but is to be sure you deliver what you promise. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes we fail at in academia because we do get busy. And you'll find once you get your first professorship that there are so many things going on that sometimes you get sidetracked. And one of the failings in academia is we set up these partnerships and we collect data, and then we fail to deliver on what we've promised the organization. And that gives a bad name to us and certainly turns them off to wanting to work with academics again. So live up to what you've promised. Don't promise too much, as Adam said, but deliver what you say you're going to deliver when you say you're going to deliver it. And I think that's really important. And then a related point is, speaking of deliverables, is be sure you give them a deliverable in the format that they need it. So just giving them a journal article isn't going to work because, as Lesley was saying, it's a totally different language. The report that you give them should be immensely different than the data that you write up to publish in, say, the Journal of Sport Management, because the language is just totally different. And I think that's a failing that we do in academia sometimes too, is we create an impact report or a report of the study for the organization, and we just copy and paste some stuff from the article that we wrote. But that doesn't really work that well because it's just speaking a whole different language. So we have to make the deliverables meaningful, very meaningful for the organization as well. And that will continue to sustain that relationship over time, again, build that trust and cultivate, a long-term partnership for you.
Great. So we have a question from the audience. Kyle Rich, who's a PhD student at Western Ontario, his question is, if you develop intimate relationships, what are some strategies for delivering less than desirable findings and still make it productive and useful for research purposes?
Great.
Other than something like an action research approach.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm just facing something like this at the moment, so I'll jump in. So you're in London, huh?
He's
London, Ontario?
Yes, he is. Well, he's actually in Australia right now, but that's another story.
All right. So just on that point about, what are some strategies about delivering some less than desirable results? That's a great question. It's a real challenge. We want to work with and deliver for, but then we're also about generating insight and learning, and sometimes that is less than desirable. So just a quick example at the moment that I'm dealing with an organisation in New Zealand, very high profile one, and all sorts of confidentiality issues. We're actually recently subject to an Official Information Act request, and it's a bit of a minefield. But one of the strategies that we think we might employ is to present a report back, and also probably likely in terms of the publication journal article, some constructive learning around the topic that you would expect from a research project. But that there also could be an offline conversation that we can have as well. So there's the public version of what we're going to deliver, which will go back to the organisation in a report, and then also publication, and it certainly got credibility in terms of the honest outcomes. But there's some subtext, there's some reading between the lines as well that you don't want to put in because it will it could be inflammatory and so on. But that could be an offline conversation as well. And so there's two objectives. One, we're trying to generate insight and learning and develop knowledge, but we're also trying to help the organisation grow and learn, locally. So from that point of view, there is, what we've decided to do is have an offline conversation, meet with the key people and go, this is our report, but then also we've noticed some of these other things that we think that might help you that we don't think is appropriate to publish. Doesn't mean that we've held it all back, it just means that we picked up on the things that are particularly going to, I guess, they end up being scapegoats, they end up being focused on when the real thing is not necessarily about that particular issue. So that's just a real live example of what we're dealing with one particular topic at the moment. I'm sure you guys have some other thoughts.
I'll jump in. And you're spot on there, obviously, with what you just said, Lesley. This again, going back to this idea of setting expectations right off the bat, is I think you do need to stress that you're coming in here as this neutral third party, that you don't want to have a shaped opinion. Obviously, you have expectations on what you're looking for and what you're going to see, but the data is what the data is, and I think when you're upfront with the organization and say, I'm going to dig into this and it is what it is. I think also a lot of it is with language. When you're relaying your results that an organization might not love to hear, is you're not telling them you're doing this wrong, you suck at this, you're terrible. You're suggesting ways to improve. You're doing a great job doing this, this, and this, but based on my data or my observations, that here's some bullet points, here's some recommendations for you to get even better, for you to improve further, for you to achieve grants or funding or whatever your relationship is. I think there's tactical ways to relay answers that organizations probably aren't looking for, or to give critical feedback.
Yeah, being constructive is absolutely key. Yeah, it's a learning exercise. It's not a judgment exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with what Lesley and Adam have said, and honesty is always the best policy, and clarifying things up front, how you want that to be handled. What I did, I had a circumstance when I was talking about the athletic department I worked with. I did find things that were going on that were not helpful or that were unhealthy. But when I had met with and talked with the athletic director before we engaged in the project to start, we kind of went over, what do we do if we find things that are unhealthy? What should we do with that? So we decided that I would have regular meetings with him, throughout the course of the study. And so I was providing ongoing feedback, and we were talking about these issues that I was seeing even before we got to the final report, so that there weren't any surprises. And we talked about how to navigate around and how to nuance that data if we needed to be doing that. So I sort of involved the key person in that process sort of throughout the study, and found that to be helpful as well.
Yeah, ECO isn't kind of another addition to the idea of the offline conversation.
Right.
Do it out. Yeah.
Great. That is essentially our questions. I don't know if there was any sort of final, words of wisdom you wanted to pass along. This is being recorded, so future years can listen to your brilliance. So if we just want to, well, in my view, go left to right. So Adam, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Well, again, with any partnership you do, it should be, at least especially for grad students, it should be something, an organization you care about and you do want to immerse yourself in, or you're curious of whatever questions they have and whatever questions you're trying to answer. It shouldn't be you doing it just purely for data, because data's everywhere. And going back to the first question you asked, Natalie, is why do one organization versus just throwing yourself all over the place? So if you are going to partner with someone, you should, at least for one of your first or second partnerships, is you should really try to dive in and want to help them. It is creating these win-win situations where it's more than just publishing a paper or getting your dissertation out. You do want to help them improve their mission or improve their bottom line or their ROI or whatever your goal is in that sense. So I think that's, I think that should be one of the very prime objectives when you're diving down this path.
Well said.
Oh, is it to me now? Is it to me now, Natalie?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I agree with everything that Adam said, of course. Other words of wisdoms with regards to partnerships. I think, remember that what you're finding that win-win situation, your goals and the organization's goals may not be the same with regards to what you're trying to get out of it. So, just be aware of that. They're going to need certain things, they're going to want certain things, and you're going to need certain things and want certain things. So you're kind of meeting someplace to get what both are going to need, and that's the essence of it. One additional strategy you might want to try is that can you give, sometimes, this maybe is not good as a grad student, but when you have the ability to do this, think about, can you do things for them that maybe are not publishable, but that are going to continue to cement that relationship that you have with them. So maybe they need a small study done, but it's not really going to be a publishable piece, but you can do it for them. Maybe do it pro bono, something like that. And so doing those things sometimes can be a foot in the door, a way to develop that relationship or keep it going. And then if you do that for them and you have an idea for another project that maybe is more publishable, they may be more willing to engage with you in that as well. So just another little tip. That's it for my wisdom, I think.
And Lesley, want to finish us off?
Sure. Some great wisdom, and I'd love Adam's, go with organisations that pique your curiosity or that ignite your passion. I think that's really, really good advice, because what that will do is sustain you when you're not hearing back from them or when things are a little rough. The relationship nature of partnership, research partnerships, means that there'll be bumps along the road, and it should be a long-term thing. And if you have a real interest and curiosity and passion for what it is that they are doing, then that will absolutely help to sustain you. And I'm sure that there's probably some advice you've heard around when you choose your PhD topic, but it's no different moving forward into developing future research partnerships. I guess a couple of things just then to finish for me. It is more effort to build partnerships. Sitting within partnerships is this thing called relationships, and we're all engaged in them everywhere, and we all know that they take a bit of effort and energy. But so it is effort. But that effort is, in my opinion, incredibly rewarding when you see the contribution that you can make locally. And then you can make it globally because you publish it, and that goes out to the world. And then someone might quote you, they might cite you, and you see that that snowballs, and it's pretty incredibly rewarding. But it does take effort to work with rather than on. But an effort that's absolutely worth it, in my opinion.
Great. Well,
can I throw one more point out there now?
Of course, no.
Well, I'll just say, I'm going to bring you full circle into this as well, is just this idea of you never know where partnerships are going to come from or emerge from, and I think we're a perfect example. I randomly met Natalie at a student symposium. I didn't know you from anyone, and we chatted for a few minutes, and I was interested in your research and vice versa, and 2 years later, we were spending a month in Nicaragua partnering with a sport for development organization and publishing papers. So you never know where that stuff is going to come from. And again, those students that are watching, is just get yourself out there and follow up. And you never know where it's going to come from. So that's all I got.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much to the three of you.